Hey YouTube, it's your girl Dr. J, and today I am going to start a new series that was requested, but also something that my husband and I had talked about, and that's going back to the subject of gifted children. And we're going to look at, I had originally talked about gifted children in terms of being Superman, and that really kind of painted a picture that there was continuity in gifted children. And while there are a lot of things that are very similar about gifted children, there also tends to be a lot of things that are unique. And what I'm going to start to talk about are those unique personalities and characteristics and really just kind of makeups that we see with gifted children. And to create a great parallel, I am going to go to the epitome of gifted people and talk about gifted children in terms of the X-Men. Yes, the X-Men. And what I'm going to be doing is talking about various makeups that we see of gifted children and relate them to different X-Men characters. And we'll see how long this series goes. You know, there are a lot of X-Men characters, so I'm going to start with one today, and then we'll just continue on. And what I hope is that you'll be able to peg your gifted child to one of these X-Men characters, or maybe several of them all wrapped in there together. So I'm going to start with the X-Men character that tends to identify me, and I'm going to go from there. So the first character I'm going to do is the one and only Xavier, or Professor X. And the thing that identifies Professor X so much is the fact that he really started the X-Men in creating a school for the gifted. And that is actually what it was originally called, School for the Gifted. Now, some of the ways I'm going to talk about the different X-Men characters, it relates to some of the movies. We're going to ignore part 3, X-Men part 3, and just go with X-Men part 1 and 2 in first class, and then also some things that we see in the comic book series. I'm not going to stick as closely to the comic book series because not as many people are familiar with the comic book series, and if you are familiar, you know that they ebb and flow and go through all these metamorphoses and have new beginnings and stuff like that. And we're just trying to get kind of a generalized overview of these characters and not stick completely in. So what makes Professor X unique in his form of giftedness? The thing that Professor X has is really telekinesis and the ability to get inside the head of other, what they call mutants, or people with these X genes. And you know that this is you or your child based on your ability to really have a connection with gifted people, being able to identify gifted children very quickly, and not only really understand the various characteristics, but also you don't just understand them, you kind of feel what they're going through. For instance, one of the biggest things that you'll see with being able to identify a Professor X is a Professor X is always, they're open in a school, they have a blog, they have a Facebook group, they have a support group, a forum. They're always reaching out to gifted children, gifted adults, parents of gifted children, trying to create a safe place and a haven so that gifted children can just be themselves. And the reason is because they can identify gifted people, identify their struggles, see when they're hiding, and really understand kind of that thought process and how giftedness works. And that's one of the reasons why I have such a heart for gifted children, not just because I'm a parent of 3 gifted children, but because I tend to relate so quickly to gifted children because I can see a gifted child. I can spot a gifted child from a mile away. And oftentimes, 9 times out of 10, the way that I identify a gifted child is not by their abilities. It's 9 times out of 10, it's based on their character. They're showing what we think of as weaknesses, or the other side of giftedness. One of the biggest things I see is a lot of times gifted children, gifted adults hiding, not being comfortable in their own skin. And I have a protectionistic instinct, and that's what you'll see in most Professor X's. They have a protectionist instinct, in that they really want to create a safe place where these kids can just be themselves, understand their abilities, understand the weaknesses that come with their abilities, train them to be the best them that they can be completely accepting of themselves and their gifts, and reaching out and being bold and approaching people and letting people know, hey, there is a safe place for you. You are always welcome, and I'll do everything I can to help you understand your gifts, your talents, your abilities, your strengths, your weaknesses, and protect you from this world that more than likely isn't going to understand you, is going to misidentify, mislabel you, and sometimes even fear and revile you because of this thing that you were born with. Another thing that's pretty interesting about Professor X is that anybody familiar with the X-Men knows that Professor X, he's in a wheelchair. And you think, this person who has, like, okay, you can get into people's head, you can make people do all these things. You can negotiate with people who aren't, mutants, people who are. You have all this ability. You got all these degrees. That's another thing about Professor X. Loves to accumulate degrees. So if you got a person who loves to accumulate degrees, Professor X. But, you have all this stuff. Why haven't you been able to fix yourself? Why are you in a wheelchair? Why'd you keep your limp? And a lot of times it's because they're so busy caring about others, they don't really take the time to say, can I use what I have for my benefit? For instance, I talk a lot about my kids' dyslexia and ways that we are remediating my kids' dyslexia. And the interesting thing is that I haven't remediated my dyslexia. I am a severe dyslexic, and I just kind of muddle through. I don't use all the accommodations that are available because I'm so busy trying to get the accommodations available for my kids and letting other people know about the accommodations. And that tends to be another one of those sides of Xavier or Professor X, is that they are so willing to help other people develop their strengths, understand and remediate their weaknesses, but they don't do that for themselves. So if you have a Professor X, or if you know a Professor X, or if you are a Professor X, one of the things that I want to say is that you don't have to accept your wheelchair, your weakness. You should also make sure you're balancing the good of your personality with understanding the other side, understanding that you have weaknesses. One of the things that's so interesting about Professor X is that he's always working with people, and he never seems to recognize that he's in a wheelchair. And he has all these people have all these skills, all these abilities, and he doesn't realize how vulnerable he is. You're going, dude, you can't walk. What's going on with you? Why are you keeping this limp? And he never addresses it, never really discusses it, never really talks about it. And it's one of those things where you think, why don't you care about you? Why don't you care about yourself? So to the other Professor X's out there, to me, let's make sure that we care about ourselves. But the thing is that we need Professor X's. We need more Professor X's. So if you're out there and you're hiding and you haven't wanted it to come out, but you have a heart for making there be a safe place for all these gifted kids around you, these misunderstood kids who have these strengths, that have these weaknesses that people aren't taking the time to develop, to strengthen, to know, then here's your chance to be out there and allow yourself to be identified, because You are needed. You bring the group together. You provide safety. You provide guidance. You provide strength. And you're generally the first person to allow gifted children to be comfortable with themselves, to be happy with who they are, to accept that they are different, and that's okay. You're the first person to teach them that, yep, I'm mutant and I'm proud. So, Professor X's, thanks a lot. See you soon. Keep up the good fight. Keep gathering the team. Keep creating a safe place. And this is Dr. J. I will be back bringing you some more of those gifted personalities represented in the X-Men. I'm out. Bye-bye.